Hi everyone, Ben here to do another commentary video. I feel like this time it would be not fair for me to do this one because it's the commentary on my own performance. So we brought in an impartial judge, my biggest fan and my biggest critic. Will this be a commentary? Will it be a roast?
Time will tell.
Let's find out.
And time. Hello, my name is Ben, and I am super excited to make you some coffee today. But before we get started, I would like you and everyone in the audience to take a deep breath in with me and slowly let it out. It feels good, doesn't it? That breath, it slowed down our heartbeat. It relaxed us, which I personally need right now, and it prepared us to have an amazing time together. This breath also brought fresh oxygen deep into your lungs, and you breathed out carbon dioxide. These two gases are very important as they help shape our planet, our lives, and even coffee. In front of you, judges, is a small cartoon that will illustrate what I'm about to talk about. A few billion years ago, there was little to no oxygen in the atmosphere. Bacteria called cyanobacteria began to photosynthesize, taking CO2 out of the air and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. Now, this newly formed oxygen was toxic to most life on Earth. However, multi-celled organisms evolved to begin to process this oxygen. By using oxygen, they were able to grow and evolve much faster, ultimately producing you and I. Since that time, there's been a very delicate balance between oxygen and CO2, and that balance is also true in coffee.
So this intro, for me, was really kind of a deep dive. I knew right from the beginning of making this set that I wanted to do something talking about aerobic and anaerobic processing, just because I think anaerobic processing has become so popular that it's captured the industry's attention and amongst producers, baristas, and roasters, but that also there is a role for these other organisms or other ways to process coffee. So I started researching different types of fermentation and where oxygen comes from. And slowly the timeline moved back and back and back until we were at like a few billion years ago. So it actually was a neat one to do because I got to learn a lot about sort of how we got where we are. And I thought it was fun to start a presentation basically at the beginning of life.
Now judges, if you open your boards in front of you, it has all the tasting notes and info for all my coffees today. Now in recent years, we have learned a lot about coffee fermentation. These new processing techniques reveal exciting flavors by favoring different types of yeasts and bacteria. Now, most of our industry's focus has been on anaerobic fermentation, but there are also aerobic bacteria, yeasts, and fungi that are capable of producing truly amazing coffee. Judges, inspired by the world around us that relies on both oxygen and carbon dioxide to exist, I would like us to explore the flavors of coffee that are possible with these two gases. So today I'm going to serve you two coffees. I'm going to serve you one coffee that was anaerobically fermented and one coffee that was processed with oxygen. I'm going to bring the espressos over to you. Please do not drink them right away. Wait for my instructions. For my espresso today, I'm going to serve you an anaerobic washed geisha from Alida Estate in Boquete, Panama. After they pick this coffee, they pulp it and place it in a stainless steel tank for 5 days, where bacteria produce CO2, which displaces the oxygen. In this anaerobic conditions, anaerobic bacteria begin to grow. They have a slower metabolism, which helps preserve the florals of this espresso. They're evaluating, don't drink quite yet. There are also lactic acid bacteria in those tanks, and they give this espresso a really creamy body. Now judges, the effects of carbon dioxide and oxygen start on that farm, but they never stop, even in these espressos sitting right in front of you. Now we all know that espresso tastes better as it cools. However, have you ever noticed that eventually it starts to taste worse? It starts to degrade as oxygen interacts with the liquid espresso. Today, judges, we get to enjoy all the benefits of a cooler espresso with none of the negatives.
So this is something I really believe in and still do, that espresso starts to taste worse if you let it sit in oxygen. And this, to me, was maybe one of the biggest things I did in this set. But it is really hard to do. So to make sure you've sucked all the espresso up into the syringe, to put that cap on without spilling, without breaking. The syringe is also really fragile. So this moment right here is maybe the hardest part of the whole set, trying to get the espresso into the syringes and capping without making a gigantic mess. There have been many sets where I have made a gigantic mess, and thankfully At this one, I don't think I spilled that much, but I think we'll find out.
I'm putting all your espressos into these syringes. These syringes are going to cool and mix the espresso. They're going to remove carbonic acid, and they're going to protect the espresso from the effects of oxygen degradation. We're going to leave them in here to cool, but when it's time, I'm going to demonstrate and walk you through the whole process. For now, you can sit back and relax, and I will give you some tasting notes. So in the espresso today, you will taste orange blossom, blood orange, nectarine, and panela sugar. The body is medium, it is round, and it is smooth. It's really lovely today. And it has a long, pleasant finish of citrus and florals. So you can sit back and relax. I'm going to get started on my milk course and tell you about that coffee, and then we'll come back to drink these espressos. So for my milk course today, I'm going to serve you an aerobic, natural margojipe from Finca Monteverde in Tolima, Colombia. This is grown by the Gutierrez family. After they pick that margojipe, they place it in open tanks for 3 days and process it as an aerobic natural. Now in this open air environment, aerobic bacteria are super efficient, grabbing any available carbohydrates and turning them into exciting new flavors. Now, margojipe is personally one of my very favorite varieties, but it can often lack acidity or be savory. And this is where careful aerobic processing can be so amazing, as it has transformed this variety and given us a completely new expression of one of my favorite coffees. Now judges, I'm just going to distribute and tamp these shots, and then I'm going to show you how to get those espressos out of the syringes and into your cups.
So a little fun fact about this coffee that I used for my milk course, it was a aerobic natural margojipe from Monteverde. That coffee was actually 2 years old. I'd used it in a competition, really liked it. Jill won that year, so I didn't get to take it to Worlds, but I froze it just in case we ever needed it again, and to me it was kind of fun to have it, and I reference it later on stage, but that coffee still held up so well. To me, it speaks to the power of freezing coffees, especially if you don't know when you're going to use them, to pop them in the freezer. I didn't know I would serve it in Australia 2 years later, but it was really cool to get to share a coffee that I really enjoyed and no longer really existed.
And I think this coffee specifically from this farm, they don't grow this variety anymore. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So this was some of the last, if not the last, coffee that the Gutierrez family had grown on their farm, which is really cool.
You can kind of see if you look at the hoppers. On the milk one, there's not much popping out there, and that's because we typically almost run out of coffee every time we compete. Same thing in the espresso hopper, there's maybe a pound of coffee there. This is something we're trying to fix for Athens. We have a lot of coffee comparatively, so it will make things a lot easier in terms of dialing and prepping. Because even when we were doing all of our prep on stage, like dialing for finals, we were almost out of coffee, and as a result, you don't really get to dial quite as much, which is actually a good strategic thing to know, that sometimes the best coffee you have, if you have a small volume of it, either look for a larger lot, or let's say you have a roast that you really like, it might be better to actually blend that roast that you really like with the second place roast and have more coffee to dial than to bet everything on that one little lot. And that's what we've done. In Nationals this year, we cupped through all the coffees that we thought were good, and we picked the best 3 roasts and we blended them. So maybe our overall average is a bit lower, but we were able to maintain that score throughout every round.
Thank you. Now judges, for this part, you can put your clipboards to the side or on your laps. I'll demonstrate, and then you can do it. So what you're going to do, you're going to pick up that syringe, holding it by the body and the handle, point it to the sky, gently twist off that top, holding it over the cup, plunge it out, then you can put it back on that metal tray in front of you. Please enjoy these espressos. I will be back with some milk drinks.
Another constant fear with the syringes is once the judges get them, is you never know how they're going to interact with them. And sometimes they can stick, so they don't come out. So this is also another moment for me when I came back and could see that everyone got the espressos out of the syringe. It was a huge relief for me, and then you can sort of move forward.
It's terrifying to watch because it's either the espresso is not going to come out and the judge is not going to be able to actually judge the espresso, or it's going to come out way too fast and the espresso is going to actually shoot all over everything, which has happened in the past. I think it happened in nationals when you competed with this set, and I think it even happened at Worlds, but you had some judges who judged, I think, almost every round. So they were pros with the syringes at this point. But yeah, it's terrifying to watch and to leave that in the hands of the judges.
Yeah, because we had actually looked at me serving all the judges, but it sort of takes too long. So we made a bit of took a bit of a risk to ask the judges to serve themselves. I think it worked out, but it's definitely risky.
Judges, in your milk course today, you will taste chocolate milkshake, dulce de leche, strawberry, and banana custard. And in the finish, that lovely chocolate note will reappear as chocolate mousse. Now, judges, Finca Monteverde is one of my favorite coffees, and that Margarita is amazing. But there's another reason why I wanted to serve it to you today. It doesn't exist anymore. That Margarita, sitting my hop over there, is the last Margarita on Earth. Climate change and its rising temperatures have made it easier for coffee leaf rust to spread. Now, Margarita is very sensitive to coffee leaf rust, and so it's no longer sustainable, for the Gutierrez family to produce this variety. I share this with you as a reminder of what we stand to lose if we do not work together to fight climate change. However, I got good news for you. The Gutierrez family is working really hard to plant even more shade trees, improve their soil health, so that one day we will drink more Margarita from Finca Monteverde. There. The Lamastis family is also working hard to protect their lands. They recently installed bioreactors on their farms. These bioreactors take the byproducts of coffee processing and turn it into organic fertilizer that they can use to improve their soil health. These bioreactors also capture and sequester both carbon dioxide and methane gas. The methane gas is even more harmful to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, so it's really important that they capture these gases. Yeah.
So one thing that we have actually spent a lot of time on, and it doesn't show up just because we never talk about it, and one of the hardest things I think in the milk course is figuring out how to split your milk. How to take four milk drinks amount of milk, steam into one pitcher, and then give exactly the same, all the judges the exact same drink. You can see there's different strategies. Some people will weigh every cup they put down to make sure it's consistent. Some people have different ways to split. The way that we discovered that I think's worked really well, and if you're competing, you should try it, is we steam all four drinks at once. We pour into the smaller pitcher, pour a little back for the first drink, and then pour that drink. Pour in again, pour a little bit back, just because those first two pours are foamier. And then on the third pitcher, for whatever reason, might be the way I steam, or it could be for anyone that steams the milk, that third pitcher's worth of milk, for that third drink, we actually don't split that one, because it will often be thinner. And then the last one, I think it's maybe because there's more milk stuck on the sides. When you pour that last split, I also don't pour any out from that one, and it ensures that the third and the fourth drink are not too thin. Usually the first two are foamy and the last two are thin. This way of splitting has worked really well for me. it's worth watching other competitors well to see how they split their drinks to get that foam consistency the same across all four milk drinks.
Especially people who are just starting to compete, I think that's something that I noticed. And like I did the same, you did the same, I think, until this routine is go back to the machine twice to steam milk. And if you think about like how full your set is, all these things that you need to do, you're reducing the time by so much by steaming all of your drinks at once. It's really something that I think is really valuable to learn how to split 4 drinks at once. It'll save you a lot of time in the end.
Also in the background right now, you might spot, we'll see, I don't know, I don't actually know if he does not, a rare use of the napkin. So you are required to have a napkin on stage. It's supposed to be served with all the courses. Typically you only bring 1 set of napkins because unless they spill or something, it never gets dirty because they don't actually use it. I think Laurel might be about to use the napkin. This could be quite exciting.
Stay tuned.
He used the napkin.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think that's maybe the first time I've seen it used.
And also, thankfully, this is the last round because your back is to him. You likely didn't notice that he used that. So if that was in the first round, likely we would just collect those napkins, make sure that they look nice and straight, maybe iron them and send them back out there. So maybe this is a sign to everybody to maybe bring more than 1 set of napkins.
Yeah, and it also shows Laura's experienced judge is using all the elements there. Drank some water as well, I think.
There, Anya. I'll be right back with my signature drink.
So I didn't memorize everyone's names in this set, but something I like to do is if I do know a judge's name, I'll say it. It is not to try and get like extra points or something. I just think it's nicer for me to feel like I'm actually serving someone I know, and using a name also helps get their attention if they are looking down or something like that. If you can use judges' names, I think it's really nice. I think it humanizes them and it humanizes you as well.
Something else that I noticed that you do when you're serving the judges is often if you start on one end with a certain set of judges, you might start your next course on the other end so that the same person isn't always getting served at the last, which I think is like such a great attention to detail. And probably that judge sits in that same spot every time that they're judging on this panel, and they're always getting used to serve last. And so I think that's like a really nice touch that also is like personal attention to detail, and they probably really appreciate getting their drinks first.
Yeah, I try and mix it up so not everyone's getting served last every time. It might surprise some judges though too, so I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know if it's good or bad, but I think it's good.
Yeah. So you can see here what I'm about to do. In the first 2 courses, I pulled espresso shots from one grinder and milk shots from another grinder. I wanted to do a blend for my signature drink of the 2 espressos. Sometimes people will pull 1 shot from each grinder, but then your shot times will be uneven. So what I did is I pulled a half dose from my grinders from each one and mixed it in that little metal canister. This made it a lot easier for me to get high tech scores because everything was going in one. It made the set kind of complicated though, because you basically had a dose for espresso and then on the other grinder a dose for milk, and then you had a half dose on your espresso grinder and a half dose on your milk grinder. And the whole time that you're doing this, you have to remember to switch between those doses on the grinders. It seems like a small thing, but it was something I was constantly worried about, because let's say I accidentally did a full dose into that metal canister. I don't even know what I would have done. I would have had to pour some of it out and measure it. So this was part that was hard, but I think paid off well. Also in terms of tech, because I did everything the same in each course, it didn't lower my tech score. It just made for a more complicated dosing and distribution.
And tell the people, what was your tech score?
In the first round, I received a perfect tech score, something that Jill and I had worked a lot on. I had weaker tech scores in Canada, and the first in the regional, I had very weak tech scores. I think I sprayed a judge with espresso, so that they can't help
Literally.
you. That can't really help you. So it's something that we worked hard on, and we were really proud to receive high tech scores. It's definitely worth it. It doesn't take as long as you think it's going to work on it. Sometimes it's even just taking a moment where rather than focusing on your speech, you're just looking at your movements and making them really natural. Deciding where everything's going on the station is really important so that the moment you're done with it, it's going to a good spot.
I think for me, something that's also impressive about that perfect score in the first round was that this set that he's working on, we actually did not practice with the tables set up in this way. In previous years, you could move the espresso machine to whichever orientation on the table you want, whether it's far left, far right, or in the middle. And during the competitor orientation, we were told that the machine has to actually stay in the center. And so that totally threw off everything that we had been practicing the whole entire time. So I think that, like, you can even see the way that he's like dosing, distributing, weighing, everything's like quite squished. I would say it's probably not like an ideal setup, but I think that Ben definitely like made it work. And I think it's really impressive that you kind of rolled with the punches, and even though we didn't practice like this at all, you still could get that top tech score. So good job.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
So I'll give everyone a little inside tip of something that didn't go correct in this set. So I think people often wonder how you can move around so much in scores. There's something that went correct in this set that actually damaged my score. So that metal canister there was sitting in a freezer, and the purpose of that sat in the freezer is it was going to absorb the heat from the espresso, cooling the drink, bringing it to a good drinking temperature. Every time I'd taken the cooler out, that canister fell in the freezer. And because it fell, it was sitting at the bottom of the freezer, and as a result, it was very, very cold. And this time, when I was doing setup, I was super careful, and I made sure that it stood upright. And because it stood upright, the top is actually not that cold, and even I could feel it when I brought it out. It was not at that super chilled, cool temperature. And as a result, my signature drink actually received quite a bit lower scores because they felt that it was not actually at an enjoyable drinking temperature. It was sort of in this like kind of cool, kind of room temperature range. So this is something that I think I've learned now, is like really making sure you do it the same way every time, and trying to not rely on just one thing to cool something maybe, or something where like it kind of cools it, being a bit more intentional. But I felt really good when I set it up that it was in the right spot, and it actually cost me some points. So if something's working, don't change it.
Judges, in the first two courses, we got to learn about the power that aerobic and anaerobic organisms have in flavor formation. For my signature drink today, I would like to use their amazing abilities to transform my ingredients in the same way they transformed my coffees. So I have a 50-50 blend of the anaerobic Alita Gesha and 50% of the natural aerobic Margot Hipe, and I'm gonna add 2 ingredients to it. One ingredient that was anaerobically fermented, and one ingredient that was processed with oxygen. So, my first ingredient. I have 3 grams of a lacto-fermented strawberry juice, anaerobically fermented. To make this, I took 200 grams of strawberries, and I added lactic acid bacteria in the form of milk kefir. Sealed it for 5 days, then blended and strained it. Now, those lactic acid bacteria break down the citric acid of the strawberries, making it less tart. The lactic acid bacteria also give it a really creamy body, just like what happened at the tanks at Elite Estate. That strawberry note is going to take the intense fruit notes of the Marble Hipe and turn them more pink. Think watermelon and pink grapefruit. For my second ingredient, I have 60 grams of a cold brewed pu'er tea. Now, pu'er is the same leaf as green and black tea. However, it is aerobically fermented with different bacteria and funguses, the same ones that are the coffee cherries at Finca Monteverde. To make this one, I took 40 grams of pu'er tea, put it in this cold drip brewer, added 200 grams of water, and set it on a really slow drip. It took several hours to come out. Now, the floral notes of this pu'er tea are going to combine with the tea notes of this pu'er tea are going to combine with the floral notes we tasted in the espresso to give us a note of jasmine green tea that's going to be in the finish as you drink this drink.
I think using ingredients, I've said this in other presentations, I think using ingredients that can often taste like other things is a really smart way to build a SIG drink. Judges are often looking to combine an ingredient with a flavor note in your espresso to create a new flavor note. And if you're using something like pu'er that can taste like many, many different things, the judge will find a new note often because there's not one specific flavor of pu'er, in the same way that there's not one specific flavor of coffee. So using something like this can often make really complex signature drinks because the ingredient itself of tea is really complex. You can have a really fruity one, you can have a floral one, you can have a savory one. So I think if you're having trouble finding a SIG drink ingredient, using something that's a bit complex and doesn't really fit into like a one-note box can be really, really useful.
Finally, I'm going to charge all of this with nitrogen gas. Now, nitrogen, in addition to oxygen and carbon dioxide, is one of the most important.
Okay, so this siphon was the talk of the town after your first round. So why don't you tell everybody what happened if you haven't watched your first round set with this siphon?
So first round, I go to squeeze out the siphon, and like a drop comes out. And one of the rules is every SIG drink has to contain a minimum of 1 shot of espresso. So if you don't serve the entire signature drink, you will lose a lot of points. And this wouldn't come out, and I'm squeezing it and squeezing it. If you go back and watch it, I think it's still there. I tried to act like it was supposed to happen, but the whole time I was dying inside. And even on this stage, like, it doesn't come out that fast. We never really figured out why it didn't come out more readily, but this was another fear of ours, especially near the end of the round, where the liquid might not come out of the siphon. So it was scary.
And like, what do you do when you have something that's like under pressure if you need to get at that liquid inside? Like, what was going through your mind?
My plan was to flip it right side up, blast the air, like the remaining amount of gas into the air, which would have basically sprayed a bunch, and then opened it manually and poured it out. It's another good thing to sort of think about and know is, like, if something goes wrong, what is your backup plan? Even if it's like messy and it doesn't look good, figuring out what that backup plan it is that's going to let you fix it and continue forward. And so that was going through my head, but thankfully it all came out, and in this routine it comes out as well.
Gases that's in our air. So inside the siphon, I have a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide represented by those coffees, and also nitrogen. It is perfectly in balance, and this is what we should seek to achieve in our planet. I've also chilled this vessel today to bring it down to a nice drinking temperature without any dilution by ice. So today, judges, for your tasting notes, you can write down watermelon, green apple, and nectarine, and pink grapefruit. The texture is velvety, and as you drink more, it will move to juicy. Please swirl before every sip And as you drink it, that beautiful jasmine green tea note will begin to emerge.
One of the things that they often are also looking for is a reason why you're using ingredients. And so we always build the SIG drinks based on taste first. So we find the ingredients, we find the techniques to make it taste good. But once you've done that, it's always good to go back through and see how things can sort of connect. So referencing the fact that there's nitrogen, CO2, and oxygen in that canister, that's not something that we planned on. But once we had the set built, once we felt that we had an amazing signature drink, what we wanted to do was to go through and find, are there any other ways that this idea and this can tie, and these ingredients can tie back to what we're doing. It's always just a nice way to do it. It doesn't always work. Don't try and force it. But sometimes there's something sitting right in front of you that you could use. And if you don't spend that time, you will miss it. A good example is Jill used hops in Milan in her signature drink. And her theme was sort of talking about mosaics. And at the end, a commentator said, hey, why didn't you use mosaic hops? And we're like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I should have used mosaic hops.
I was actually going to pause it at the exact same point, but I was going to talk about something different. So you can hear that when Ben is not only giving tasting notes for this course, but also very specific drinking instructions, and that's something that you'll definitely hear in almost any barista presentation. People will give very specific drinking instructions for the judges to follow. And something that is really important is, as a barista competitor, if you are giving people very specific drinking instructions or want them to do something in a certain order in a certain way, like taking a drink of water between courses or swirling in between sips, like Ben had said in this course, that when you are also tasting these drinks and coming up with these tasting notes, that you're doing the exact same thing that you want the judges to do. That way your notes are going to be as accurate as possible.
Judges, 2.6 billion years ago, our planet was threatened with too much oxygen in the air, and it was our bacterial ancestors that evolved to save us. Today, the opposite is true. There's too much CO2 in the air, and it threatens our existence. But we can change things. In the same way that they saved us, we can change the conditions of our planet, and the same way that we can change conditions in a processing tank. I am so thankful that this industry can teach us so much about different gases, about coffee, and about our world. Hopefully, this new knowledge will lead us to a healthier planet and much tastier coffee. It has been amazing being here today. Thank you so much, judges. And I'll call time.
There's no better feeling than getting to call time when you're like right at the wire, you have a couple seconds left and everything went well. The set was super fun to put together. It was a ton of work. I feel like it hit themes that I thought were really important. It showed new techniques. And in Athens, you'll actually see a lot of what we did here developed and improved. And so I'm really excited to basically add on to what we've done here and tell like another chapter to it. Thanks everyone for watching. We will see you in Athens, and then we'll continue to do some commentary and then hopefully just keep this going.